Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This is part 7, I believe, of the Oncidium Alliance series with the two mass-produced Oncidium types that I got specifically for this series that grow in the house. They're not out in the grow room, they stay in there. And we haven't really looked at these since they were last repotted. Not as a formal update anyway. I haven't even looked at these, I just dumped on the table, so I'm winging this, as they say. Right, so this was the named Cambria Renaissance coral, and since this has been repotted, it's done no new roots, no visible new roots that I can see, but it did have some roots, so it's not rootless, but they were older roots. It does have quite a reasonable new growth growing out to the side, but just the one. Now you have to bear in mind on this plant, this pseudobulb round the back was the old one, yeah, and that had pushed out two which were both in bloom, yeah. So in theory both of those should produce a new growth. Well, one has, and at the moment one hasn't, but that doesn't mean to say it won't. It could just start a new growth a bit later. So there's been no leaf loss or anything. It's just coming into growth, new growth. I don't think there's any new roots at the base of that yet. Not that I can see, but I did put a little bit of extra moss around the base of that to try and encourage. I think that new growth was there effectively when we repotted it, probably tiny, but it's growing on slowly but surely. So that's that one, and then the other one was a much more substantial plant, shall we say, and this was the Catrin Jacques Nikki. Must have got the price on it. Not that I paid that for it. I always argue over prices. And sometimes it's just worth, if you're getting more than one plant, is to, add them up, get to a total and knock some off and say, how about that for cash? It's got to be worth a try. A lot of the orchids are getting sold with quite a high margin on them. It's always worth haggling. Anyway, this one. Now this one has quite a lot of new growths on it. Since it was repotted, in the pot, we have no signs of new roots. But we do have signs of new roots coming from the base of some of the pseudobulbs. Not a lot, not for the size of the plant, but some. So there are some new roots, and these are not coming from the new growths, they're coming from the previous growths, yeah, like down in here. But starting from that stick, which was basically to stop it wobbling in the pot, it's not effectively tied on, it's just leaning. We've got a little new growth starting there. Then coming round here, we've got a new growth with some concertina leaves. Now you get that on Oncidium types when, I'll say it's lack of hydration, but it's a bit of both. It's lack of hydration followed by hydration, followed by lack, followed by, so it's uneven watering does that, which when you've got a good root system would only happen if you really let the plant dry out. And obviously a plant like this is currently growing even though it hasn't got a good root system, so it needs to stay quite moist but not soggy. If this media stays soggy, the older roots that I've got, not many, will rot because they're not actively growing. They're just supporting the plant, not in active growth. The new ones will be, and once those new ones get going down in the pot, then it shouldn't dry out because it's in active growth. So we've got one there, one with a concertina shape on it, and we've got another one here. That one's pushing on a bit stronger, yeah. And then we've got another little one starting here. Is that it? Oh no, there's another one tucked in under there. So I don't know how many that was. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new growths on that plant. But then it did start out with more pseudobulbs. It has dropped a couple of leaves, and it looks like it's going to drop another pair soon. but that's on a very old pseudo bulb. So yeah, this one's growing slowly but nicely. It's not rocketing away, but it's growing. And now I can see some new roots starting. Once those start getting down in the pot, they'll start to branch and create effectively a replacement root system, at which point it will grow much faster, but not yet. So that's a quick update on those two. Again, if you're growing orchids in the home, keep your eye out for bugs. These are living quite close to the store-bought Phalaenopsis, which do have a few mealybugs at the moment. So I've got to pay special attention on Oncidium types. There, that's where they love to get, at the base of where an old spike was. They love getting down in there. So that's the first place to look. Scale love getting in there as well. You shouldn't really get scale in the home unless you bring them in. They're not very mobile, but mealybugs can travel. So, but again, you're more likely to bring them in than them just appear out of nowhere. So watch your new plants, you know, perhaps keep them in a different room for a while, or give them a precautionary insecticide spray with a systemic. Try and kill off anything that might be lurking that you haven't actually seen. Not essential, but if you can see bugs, the first goal is don't buy the plant. Don't deliberately buy a plant with bugs and bring them home into your environment. That is not the brightest of ideas, unless it's something you just absolutely have to have, in which case take the appropriate precautions when you get it home. Okay, that's a quick update on those two. So say this one, I was expecting 2 growths on this one, and so far we've only got 1. Again, it could just be that it's got a very weak root system, and you know, it's still settling down from the change from where it was grown in a nursery in those perfect conditions to getting bashed around, transported, stored in different places, different temperatures, sometimes in the dark, and then you bring it home. So it's obviously had a little bit of rough treatment, a little bit of a shock. Sometimes it can take a while for a plant to settle down, but Oncidiums usually recover pretty quick. You shouldn't have to wait too long for them to respond to the environment, providing it's not way off. You know, absolutely bone dry air won't do them any good. Total lack of light won't do them any good. They need reasonable light, yeah? And they like some humidity in the air, more so than the Phalaenopsis and some other types. They do like a bit of moisture, a nice buoyant air feel to it. It's difficult to explain in words, but if I walk in somewhere I can tell whether it's a growing atmosphere or not, and my home isn't. But these, I'll show you I suppose, live here. So they live in a humidity tray. Yeah, which is constantly topped up with water, which we could do with doing now. Now all that white on the clay is because I top this up with tap water. I'm not wasting my RO water, never gets near the plants. And then that just evaporates. Yeah, and it just keeps a little microclimate in this area. Doesn't travel far, but because there's no major airflow going on in here, it just keeps this a little bit moister than the rest of the house, especially this time of year when the heating's on a lot more than it would be, you know. Once we get out into spring, the heating won't be on, and the level of humidity in my house will go up. And one of the main reasons it goes up at a reasonable rate, especially up this end of the house, is because this door keeps getting opened and closed. And in here, it's 75%. So a little bit will drift out, which is good stuff. So there we go then, that's those two, and where they live, and a little progress update. Probably not another update for some time now, but it might be nice to look perhaps in another 5 or 6 weeks to see how these new growths have progressed. I doubt if there'll be any spikes at that point. They'll probably come later in the year. But anyway, there we go then. So that's the Oncidium Alliance pair of plants.